And the storm was a Cape Verde type hurricane, so it formed in Cape Verde Islands on September 14 off the coast of Africa. This intense hurricane was well documented around the region and in the Bahamas. The New York Times, they actually sent two reporters, the New York Times sent two reporters to the Bahamas to document the storm. And the New York Times on October 25th of 1866 reported the storm jarring from the region area, calling the storm is hurricane in the central Atlantic. The earliest and the easternmost reporter from the corner of the storm. It headed west-northwest, reaching a major hurricane strength just north of the Lesser Antilles on the 29th. And as of then, the Bahamas is strengthened to a powerful Category 4 hurricane of 140 miles per hour, and causing widespread damage across the islands, leaving behind significant death toll. The storm left St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, on the morning of the 28th September 1866, where several ships were blown ashore and appeared demolished. By the early hours of September 30th, it was affecting the Turks and Caicos Islands, where 75% of the entire population was left destitute and homeless because the storm destroyed hundreds of homes, resulting in 63 deaths. The hurricane moved away from the province quickly on the morning of October 3rd, and it then had left waters of the Bahamas and then recurred out to sea without any other landmass. The last report of the storm was on October 5th, after resulting in massive casualties in the Bahamas. It caused an additional 250 deaths from the Evening Star, a steamer called the Evening Star. It is very possible that the hurricane was much stronger over open waters in the Atlantic, but meteorological records from the 1800s to the early 20th century were very sparse and also contributed to the reduced number of tropical cyclones in the Atlantic. According to observations, the Great Bahama Hurricane entered Bahamas by the southeast Bahamas somewhere between the islands of Miguana and Nassau on a northwesterly track, with sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. It then passed just due southwest of the island of San Salvador and made a direct passage over the island of Crooked Island after making a passage over the island of Crooked Island, then crossed over the island of Long Island and Exuma. After passing over the Exuma Keys, its direction changed to a more northwesterly track. It was during this time that intensity increased and was packing sustained winds of over 140 miles per hour. After leaving Exuma, its forward speed increased and its movement changed to a more northwesterly direction. It then went on to devastate with a direction the island of New Province as a strong Category 4 or even a past borderline Category 5 storm. The hurricane crossed over central Bahama on a more northerly track and then exited Bahamas into the open waters of the Atlantic. The hurricane moved away from the province quickly, and by the morning of October 3rd, it left waters of the Bahamas and then recurved out to sea without affecting any other landmass. The last report, the system was on October 5th after the results of massive casualties in the Bahamas. It caused less than 250 deaths from the Evening Star. Well, in terms of damages was severe and extensive. And actually, if I listed everything that was destroyed by the hurricane, I couldn't be here until tomorrow morning. But I'm just giving most of the examples I'm giving you is notable landmass that you're familiar with that you might know about. So it's not that these are the only places that were destroyed. Well, Baptist Church was blown down, but it was built by the congregation, aided by a grant of £200 by the legislature. The church at St. Andrews, the cathedral, St. Matthew's Church, the missionary hall, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, and Ebenezer Church were all badly damaged in some way or the other. The girls' Wesleyan School, the principal schoolhouse on the Woodcock property, and Mr. Watkins' schoolhouse chapel were among those that were blown down. The Tiana was also unroofed and badly damaged. The extensive buildings of the quarantine station and Atoll Island, which were only recently completed 2 months before the hurricane, were all blown down. On Bay Street, a large number of stores were totally destroyed. Many others suffered significant damage, both buildings within them. In the downtown area, a total of 27 shops and several warehouses were totally destroyed. 46 were badly damaged and 19 were unroofed. Even bodies were affected by the disaster. Old Cemetery on the western seashore was washed out and boats and skulls littered the beach everywhere. Almost all the street lamps were totally destroyed or damaged. The landing at Hog Island, now called Paradise Island, was broken and most of the lamps and reflectors were either destroyed or badly damaged. And this is illustrated. This is basically illustrated by the Illustrated London News. It's basically illustrated of Nassau Harbor during the 1866 hurricane. This year is Trinity Church after the hurricane of 1866. This year is the John H. Neely, and you might now know it as, it's located on East Street and Bay Street. It's now a t-shirt place, but one time it was used as a bike, and another time it's now a t-shirt factory. And this was destroyed. This actually, after the 1866, it was a two-story building. It was recently built before the hurricane. The top story was destroyed, and the top story housed the U.S. ambassadors as the U.S. ambassador, office of the U.S. ambassador, and also housed the dance hall. And this is what it looked like before the hurricane. Pretty impressive building. And this is the Nassau Harbor, what they call back then is the public and government. And this top one is the public. This was the last of the blockade runners. The hurricane occurred in 1866. The blockade running era ended in 1865. So that was the last blockade running ship that was left in China. It was totally destroyed by the hurricane. The ocean steamer was found miles away from its mooring, and another, the General Clinch, which was the last blockade running ship, remained in harbor, was smashed to countless pieces against the public wharf after having crushed and inflicted a similar fate upon the colonial schooner. Of the craft in the harbor, 92 were totally destroyed, 97 were badly damaged, and 43 were slightly damaged. Trinity Church, which had just been finished a few months before the hurricane, had a considerable expense, was blown down. And Bell Baptist Church was also blown down but rebuilt by the congregation aided by a grant of £200 by the legislature. The church at St. Anne's in Belmore Chapel were totally destroyed. The cathedral, St. Matthew's Church, the Missionary Hall, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, and Ebenezer Church, all badly damaged in some way or the other. On Bay Street, a large number of stores were totally destroyed, or I think I say that. And in terms of island-wide damage, like I said, every single island was totally devastated. Make-Warner, the center of the hurricane passed over the island sometime just before midnight on the 30th of September. And that same day, the main settlement of the northwestern shore, 10 out of 13 houses were totally destroyed. At Long Key, the canal salt pond was seriously damaged between 50,000 to 60,000 bushels of salt, or about 1/3 of the year's crop, were destroyed. Houses on the leeward side of the hall, salt flour on them again, and all the tanks were filled with salt or salt water. In Crooked Island and Ackland, 3/4 of the dwelling homes were destroyed, and the population of this island was left in a deplorable state, without food or shelter. Many areas seas overflowed the fields, destroying all vegetation, contaminating with salt water, while high lands were devastated by the violence of the winds and the rain. Long Island, the entire Long Island was said to be totally devastated. Almost every building had been swept to the ground. 10 days after the storm, the residents were said to be suffering severely from starvation and only survived and fish. During the hurricane, 62 residents had to seek shelter in the prison. 22 residents had to seek shelter in the police office because their private residents were destroyed during the hurricane. On the island of Ronki was said to be totally devastated by this hurricane. All of the crops were totally destroyed, and starvation was said to be widespread, and most of the residents were left homeless. The population of Ronki was mainly employed in the raking of salt, and about 130,000 bushels, the greater part of an unusually large crop, was destroyed by this hurricane. And most of the southeast islands, at the time, they saw the raking was the number one thing for them, especially the southeast islands. The island and its over, the island suffered tremendously, and all the boats and means of transportation were destroyed by this hurricane. Fortunately, people survived, but the cotton and corn crops, which were cash crops, which were to some extent were not too badly damaged by the hurricane. Since on this island, 2 Episcopal churches, several private developments were totally destroyed. In addition, 7 Baptist churches were totally destroyed, and 3 others badly damaged. They were able to survive off the wreck of the western shore of the island, and some crops, corn, peas, and fields And this is what it looked like after the hurricane. It was never, the second floor was never rebuilt after the hurricane. And it was, actually first it was John S. George. It was the John S. George store. It was the first John S. George store in Nassau. Damage in the harbor, every vessel, boat, with one single exception, was driven ashore, badly damaged or wrecked. The southern shore was shown with wrecked boats and in some places piled on top of